Hi, everyone. So we're going to go ahead and get started. My name is Kimberly Ueyama. I'm an executive director at CCS and also a member of the YANA Board. So very excited to have all of you with us today. Just a couple notes before we get started. So first of all, we're just really grateful for the opportunity to present on this topic, both as Yale SOM alums, so all three of us went to Yale SOM, and as current members of the CCS staff. And for those joining us for the first time, do just want to make a quick plug for the Yale Alumni Nonprofit Alliance, which is the organization that has been hosting these webinars and all of these series. YANA is an organization that is open not only to Yale alumni, but also Yale friends. And we're really committed to leveraging the collective power of the Yale network for greater social good. So I encourage everyone on this call to check out the website, potentially think about becoming a member of YANA and supporting us so that we can continue doing webinars and events like this one. So we'll quickly go over the agenda. We're going to do a quick introduction, then go into understanding some donors, preparing for the ask, and then thinking about the ask itself, and then how to manage responses following an ask. Should also mention that you are all encouraged to type questions into the chat box, and we're going to leave about 20 minutes at the end of this webinar to address the questions that you do have. There was also an early question about whether or not the slides would be available, and we're happy to share those at the end of this as well. So first, I'm going to introduce our presenters. So Miriam Droller is a Senior Vice President here at CCS. She's Yale SOM 2008 and has worked with a range of clients, so really excited to have her on board. Kimberly Kicenuik Hubbard is a Corporate Vice President here at CCS, also Yale SOM 2011, and has also had a range of experiences, so we'll be talking through some of those with us. And again, my name is Kimberly Ueyama. I'm Executive Director. I was SOM 2016 and also a proud member of the YANA Board.
Thanks so much, Kimberly, and thanks to all of you for joining us today and for the opportunity to be with you. As Kimberly mentioned, we're all very proud SOM alums and have all actually worked with CCS since our respective graduation dates. CCS is the largest global consulting firm dedicated to fundraising. We've got a team of about 325 employees that are dispersed with regional offices throughout the US, as well as in London. We work only with nonprofit clients specifically as they look to launch large-scale fundraising initiatives or grow fundraising capacity. Here you can see a selection of some of our recent clients, but we work in every sector of traditional philanthropy and with organizations of all sizes. Education, of course, arts and culture, healthcare, human services, social services. And we offer a wide variety of services, everything from capacity assessments to campaign planning and campaign execution, board development and training, and also do some interim management services as well for various clients. Excuse me. I'm going to turn it over to Kim Hubbard to talk through the philanthropic landscape and understanding our donors.
Sure. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Can both of you, can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes, you're good.
That's great. So with that brief introduction on our firm and our experience guiding fundraising and solicitation strategies, we'll launch right into our first agenda item, which, as Miriam mentioned, is understanding donors. It goes without saying that successful fundraising efforts begin really by developing an understanding of both the broad fundraising trends generally and also of your organization's specific donor demographics. And over the next couple of slides, we have some context for our discussion this afternoon. And I should note that our session today will focus on US-based donors and trends. So obviously there are some differences globally, which we're happy to speak to broadly during the Q&A part of our presentation. But what we have here are a few slides summarizing the US fundraising landscape, the outlook for which we're very excited to report is quite positive. Many of you are probably familiar with Giving USA's annual report on philanthropy. Giving USA is the longest running and most comprehensive report of its kind in America. It's published by the Giving USA Foundation and the Giving Institute, and researched and written by Indiana University Lilly School of Philanthropy. And the next couple of slides report some data from the most recent version of the Giving USA report. The pie chart on this slide, lifted from the most recent report available in 2017, illustrates an important milestone for the American nonprofit sector, which is charitable giving surpassing the $400 billion mark for the first time since these data were collected in 1956. So it's quite positive news for anyone in the sector, and of course for fundraisers as well within the country. Americans' record-breaking charitable giving demonstrates our solid commitment, I think, to philanthropy, and also reflects a booming stock market and a fairly strong economy, at least at the moment. This $410 billion that we have reported on this slide likewise represents about a 5% increase, 3% adjusted for inflation, over the revised total of $389.64 billion, which Americans contributed to nonprofits in 2016. And as you can see from this pie chart, the vast majority of American charitable giving is generated by individuals. And giving, though, has increased from all sources, all four sources listed on the slide: individuals, foundations, bequests, and corporations in 2017. So moving on to the next slide, we can see that compared to 2016, the overall distribution of charitable giving across the nonprofit sector also remained relatively steady, with religious organizations receiving a little more than a third of all gifts, followed by education, which includes higher ed as well, and human and social services institutions. While giving to individuals and international affairs organizations declined, all of the other subsectors experienced growth in 2017, with 7 subsectors actually experiencing more than 5% growth over the previous year. So again, very good news. Interestingly, giving to foundations saw the largest growth, increasing 15.5% year over year, driven largely by extraordinary large gifts from major philanthropists such as Michael and Susan Dell and Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan to their respective charitable foundations. So when we think about why people give, transitioning from this macro picture of the philanthropic landscape to micro motivations of individual donors, we also see some typical patterns emerge. Though the decision to make a charitable gift is obviously a highly personal one for most donors, research shows that donors share some common behaviors, and we've listed a few of the common behaviors on this slide. Namely, donors respond to inspiring causes, to successful programs. We always talk about how donors want to give to successful and exciting initiatives, not failing initiatives or because an organization is in dire need of money. And also compelling solicitors, that people give to people, obviously, and who solicits the gift, which we'll talk about in a bit, really does matter to the success of respective solicitations. Importantly, too, though it may sound very obvious to everyone on this call, donors give because they're asked to give. And we have this reason sort of bolded on the screen. With this background, I'll turn things back over to Kimberly, who's going to describe how we can apply these macro observations to develop more effective micro strategies for preparing for the ask and soliciting donors.
Great, thank you, Kim. So in this section, we're going to talk about the preparation. So even before we go to meet with a prospective donor, thinking about all the steps that can take place before that occurs to ensure that that interaction is as positive and meaningful as possible. So when we think about preparing for the ask, we like to think about these as invitations rather than solicitations. We want the experience for both parties to be positive and to be mutually beneficial, both for the prospect and for the organization that's being represented in this particular conversation. You know, we do like to think of these as partnerships and as relationships, and not as financially motivated transactions. We also think about the factors that are within our control and want to focus on those factors as we're preparing for an ask. So we can think about how well we make our case and present the organization. We can do a lot of background research on understanding the potential donor's interests, making sure that the conversation is as tailored as possible for that prospective donor. We can also be practicing as potential askers the style in which we ask. Another thing that can be planned for is who is actually going to be present in that meeting and what each participant's role is going to be. We can determine how much time we have. The amount that we're asking for can be researched and thought through thoroughly, and then also how well we are prepared for potential questions or objections that might occur during that conversation. Of course, there are also some factors that are not within our control, so things that we can't predict or we really don't have any influence over. Pieces like the individual's personal financial situation, which is often delicate, the level of interest that they actually do have in the organization, what they are willing to give, any reasons for not giving that might be personal, and also the questions that they might have about the ask and about the organization. So when we think about developing the pitch, we want to think about reflecting on why you support the organization. So in addition to introducing yourself and the organization, it's often helpful to share an anecdote about why that organization is of particular significance in your life, and that's often a powerful communication tool to ensure that your genuine passion for the work of the organization is really being shared with whoever you're speaking with. In general, we want the pitch to be relatively short, so no longer than 90 seconds. And we want to be thinking about things like, why is this organization so special? What's exciting about this? And really provide a call to action that, again, is in partnership with whoever the prospective donor is. One of the crucial components of this conversation is really thinking about limiting, the time that you as the person who is asking is speaking versus the donor or prospective donor, him or herself. So we do want to think about these, and we like to encourage individuals to really listen to the donor or prospective donor, and to ensure that they have the space and the time to really think about what this ask is. It's often our instinct just as human beings to really talk just to fill the silence. And we want to ensure that as the person coming with an ask, we are being respectful of the donor and really allowing them to process what we're approaching them with. It's extremely important to hear from the donor what their interest is, again, to build that relationship and to ensure it's a partnership rather than a financial transaction. So the next two sections of our presentation are on the ask itself and then managing responses from the ask. And, this slide previews some of those pieces. And so I'm going to turn it over to Miriam, who's going to go ahead and walk us through the next section of our presentation, which is on the ask.
Great, thanks, Kimberly. So actually making the ask or the thought of making the ask can provoke a lot of anxiety, whether it's a university president or whether it's a volunteer or whether it's, as we've sometimes encountered in our field, lifelong development staff. There can be an uncertainty around it, and whether you're the one doing the asking or whether you're coaching a board member or a leader or volunteer to do the ask, it helps to have this preparation and this framework for doing so to relieve some of that anxiety. And frankly, this anxiety pervades whether you're asking for $10 or whether you're asking for $10 million. So before getting into the ask, I just want to reiterate some of what Kim just walked us through. I want you to think about this as an invitation. You're really inviting them to join you. So you have committed your resources, whether it's your time, whether it's your financial commitment, both, and you're going to invite them to make that same type of a commitment. Kim talked about preparing for the ask. So you've done your homework in advance of this conversation, and you know what you're going to ask for, and you're prepared to make the best case possible. You're going to position the organization in the best possible way to spur somebody to consider making that type of a financial commitment. And you're also prepared to listen. We really encourage people to treat this as a conversation. It's not just a one-sided get the ask out there. It's really meant to be a dialogue and advance both the relationship between the two people, but also the prospective donor with the organization. So how do we go about doing that? So opening the conversation is actually a really important step of this. You want to take the time to thank the person you're speaking with. So thank them for taking the time to meet or speak with you. Thank them for their past support. If they've been a volunteer, thank them for their previous involvement. This makes them feel good about having the conversation. It also helps to set yourself at ease, and it starts the dialogue flow. You want to use the opportunity to update the person about any recent news or recent events that the organization, that are pertinent to the organization that they may or may not be aware of. And you also, even at this early stage, want to take the time to listen. So if I were, for example, approaching Kim Ueyama about making a gift for Yale SOM, I'd start the conversation. Hi, Kim, it's so nice to talk to you. It's been a little while since we caught up at reunion. I hope everything is going well. Now, Kim will say back to me, oh, things are great. I just started a new project at CCS. I'm really excited about it. Here's what, et cetera, et cetera. And I want to kind of get a sense of where is Kim, where is her mood, how's her day going, is this a good time for me to be talking to her about making a gift? So I want to listen to what she has to tell me, and then I do want to direct the conversation, and I want to say, thanks, Kim, for taking the time to talk to me. I'm actually calling because I wanted to talk to you about what's happening at Yale School of Management. I don't know if you know, but I've just heard that round 1 and 2 applications have increased, and the caliber of students that are applying are really top-notch, and isn't that fantastic? And so I really want to kind of put Kim in the mindset where she's thinking about SOM, she's thinking about her own experience with the organization, and thinking about having a conversation about the school. So then you want to get to articulating the need, and you want to keep the conversation personal and positive. You want to get at what resonates with the donor. And you want to do what you can to create a sense of urgency. So Kim, round 1 and 2 applications are up. You may know that one of the dean's current priorities is to increase financial aid and scholarships for the incoming class. I know educational access is something that's been important to you. I know you worked for Teach for America before you got to Yale. I know during your time at Yale you were involved with some educational activities, and through your work at CCS have continued to work with organizations that provide educational access. What you're really trying to do is position the case, the arguments for support in a way that resonate with the donor, that she can relate to, that she reflects on her own experience and her own interests, that really start to set up, yes, those are things that I really do care about. I'm glad to hear that SOM is looking to increase financial aid, that the dean has made that one of his priorities. So in terms of strengthening how you position the case, stories are really an excellent way both to demonstrate the need and the urgency of that need, as well as make the case applicable to a donor and relatable to a donor. So you want to talk about the people that benefit from the organization. You want to talk about the impact of those gifts. You want to share facts if you know about them in terms of how the organization has demonstrated success in the past. And you want to give Kim an understanding of how her support can help meet this need of increased financial aid. So I might say to Kim, you know, yesterday I actually was interviewing a number of first-year SOM students who are applying for internships at CCS. They're a remarkable group of candidates. One in particular stood out, and she talked about the importance of receiving a scholarship to SOM and how without that scholarship, she wouldn't have been able to have that experience. SOM has made some incredible strides in the last 5 years. They have increased financial aid so that X percent, let's say 40% of the class receives some sort of award for the incoming class receives some sort of financial aid scholarship. And Kim's like, that's great, that's fantastic, what great strides Yale's made. Yes, I agree, but we're only meeting a fraction of the need. 80% of the students who are applying request some sort of financial aid, and really SOM is losing top caliber students to other institutions who are giving more financial aid than what Yale is able to do right now. So I want to keep, again, the conversation moving and start to lead into the ask sentence. So I want to say to Kim, I'm asking you to do 3 things today. So this is even before I get to the actual ask. I want to ask Kim to think about making a stretch commitment to SOM. I know scholarships are important to you. I want you to think about making a meaningful commitment to advance the scholarship priority at SOM. Kim, I want you to be a leader. Your classmates really respect you, they look up to you, and your support would be an incredible endorsement of this initiative and send a really powerful signal to the rest of the class that this is an effort that's worth supporting. And third, Kim, I want you to feel good about thinking about this commitment, about making this commitment, about our conversation, and about the potential impact you can have. If everybody feels good about the commitment that they're making to this effort, the effort is going to succeed. So by having this conversation with Kim, I want to accomplish a couple of things. I want to start to position her so that she's ready for the ask. I want to build her up. I want to make her feel good about her association with the organization, about the role that the organization has played in her own life, about the role that she can play for that organization's role in other people's lives. And I want to get her to the point where she's excited about actually getting the ask. So I want her to kind of at the end of this stage be ready on the edge of her seat to say, okay, great, what's next? So then you actually get to the ask. And the best way to do this is to have a very simple, very clear, and very concrete sentence. And you want to practice. Kim alluded to practicing the ask before. This is really important. And so this is the reason why is so that you don't derail during this part of the conversation. You want to avoid saying things that you don't want to say, like, I know this is a really big ask, or I'm really sorry to have to ask you to do this. You want to be confident in the ask that you're making. You believe in this organization, you believe in the cause that you're raising funds for, and you want Kim to feel that same confidence in what you're asking her to consider to do. So I would say, Kim, would you consider joining me in making a gift of $1,000 this year in support of scholarships for first-year students at SOM? And after you make that ask, this comes the hardest part of the conversation. You want to be silent. You want to say nothing. You want to wait for their response. Your inclination is going to be to fill that silence. If Kim doesn't respond right away, I might be inclined to say, I'm so sorry that was a really big ask amount. I don't want you to be uncomfortable. And instead, what that silence actually means is Kim is processing what you've just said to her. She's probably thinking, wow, I hadn't really ever thought of making a gift like that to SOM or maybe to anywhere. Is that something I can do? You know, can I do that financially? Can I do that with the other commitments that I have? Is that the impact that I want to have? And wow, what would $1,000 in support of that do? And that would enable other students like me to attend SOM and have the experiences, not just at school, but to be able to benefit from that SOM education and network for the rest of their careers. So I'm going to turn it over to Kim Hubbard to talk about what might those responses, what might Kim say to me in those types of situations, and how might we respond to those answers.
Great. Thank you, Miriam. So moving on to the next slide and our final section of content for the webinar this afternoon. Once you've thoughtfully prepared for and made the ask, as Miriam has mentioned, the final phase of the solicitation involves fielding your potential responses from your donor or donor prospect. And luckily, there are only a few ways that a donor can respond, and we've listed them out on this table on the slide that you see before you. Assuming our solicitation is of a major gifts type of variety, like the one that Miriam laid out, $1,000 for scholarship support for SOM, donors will have really one of 6 possible responses. So Kim might agree to make that gift. She might say right away, Miriam, I think $1,000 sounds great. Sounds like a really important initiative, and I'm happy to give at that amount asked. Kim might agree to give an even greater amount. We love when this happens, but it is, as you'd imagine, quite rare. So Kim might say, you know, I'm actually thinking I'd like to do $1,500 or $2,000 because, you know, I've been able to plan financially for some of my other philanthropic commitments, and that's what I've set aside for Yale. Kim might, unfortunately, say something that's a little bit less positive rather. She might offer considerably less or less than requested. So she might say, you know, $1,000, that's a lot of money, Miriam. I can give you $500 or I can give you $50. She might flat out decline, which is probably the answer that as fundraisers we most worry about hearing. And luckily that's a pretty rare answer that someone flat out declines. And then finally, the 6th possible way that Kim might respond is she might ask for more time to consider. So as Miriam referenced, the silence that follows the ask sentence is a critical silence. It's a critical silence not to interrupt, to give your donor some space to think about the request that's been made for them. And it's, you know, it could very well be a reasonable reaction from the donor that you're speaking with for more time for consideration, particularly because we're putting forward, you know, potentially pretty sizable requests for philanthropic support during these meetings. So over the next couple slides, what we are going to describe is how seasoned fundraisers manage and respond to each of these 6 responses, and how we can really turn even reactions that appear to be negative into the best possible fundraising outcome for their respective organizations. So again, the first 3 potential responses are all pretty positive, as you'd imagine. So if Kim agrees to the full request or an amount that's even greater than the request, the way we would respond is with gratitude, enthusiasm. You know, thank you so much for your support. This is very generous. You're going to have tremendous impact. And then to immediately follow up with a pledge agreement or some sort of documentation to document that gift. Now, if Kim instead wants more time to consider, it's likely that she has some questions about the organization or about the request that's been made that Miriam, as a seasoned fundraiser, might be able to answer if she asks the right questions. So again, one of the purposes of these meetings is to learn more about the donors that we are meeting with, and obviously to strengthen the relationship between those donors and our organizations. So as a seasoned fundraiser, Miriam will hopefully ask some probing questions that will reveal Kim's thought process and really get to the bottom of, what is the source of her hesitation? Is it, does she have questions about the initiative that Miriam can answer? Is there additional information that we might provide from Yale SOM, from the scholarship program? So again, it's important to ask these questions and then to take the time to really thoughtfully listen to the response, and then hopefully to adjust the solicitation and follow-up strategy accordingly, so we're able to continue the conversation with Kim about this particular request. Responses 4, 5, and 6 obviously on the outset appear to be less positive, but these two can be great learning opportunities. If Kim offers less than requested, like for instance, $500 or $600 instead of the $1,000 that's been asked, the best response always begins with gratitude, followed by an invitation that she is welcome to take more time to consider the request. This is especially true if we hit response number 5, which is an offer of significantly less than requested. So if Kim comes back and says, I have a check right now for $25, $50, it's important to slow down that conversation. So language like, we appreciate that this is a really big decision, Kim. We know that we're asked, this is a great deal of money that we've requested, but we're confident that, this sort of gift at this level will really set the pace for fundraising, will inspire your fellow alumni, and make a sizable impact to the success of our scholarship program are all really helpful. And I think sometimes taking the time to slow down the decision and continue the conversation about what motivates Kim's giving and how she feels about SOM and its scholarship program will help prevent sort of a knee-jerk we call it sort of a go-away check from a donor, in which clearly someone wants to end the conversation. We might also find it really valuable to return to some of the specific reasons we're making a request of this size at this time from this donor. So again, remember, we very thoughtfully prepared for this conversation. So hopefully underscoring the urgency of the project, the necessity of leadership level gifts as pace setting and inspiring to other donors are all sort of readily available in our minds in case we have a response like this. We should have this context ready, and we will if we've done a good job in preparing. And then finally, if a donor comes back with the response that we as fundraisers most dread, the flat out decline, we need to remember that hearing no is not necessarily no never. It means no not now. And again, it's a great opportunity to use this conversation to deepen our understanding of what motivates this particular donor. And I think, a great rule of thumb is, we bulleted on this slide, is to ask if you can revisit the conversation or revisit with an update about your organization at a later date. Typically, even donors that decline will agree to revisiting the conversation. And again, the more that we can learn about what motivates a particular donor and his or her giving, the better we're going to be able to tailor sort of the request and the case for the request at the next conversation, the next meeting. And perhaps in the future the timing will be right. So again, trying to identify the reasons and concerns behind the decision is probably the most important value add or benefit from even a solicitation that ends in a decline. So for any of these responses, notice that there are a few qualities that remain the same. It's essential that solicitors thank prospects. So whatever you hear, these are valuable opportunities to express gratitude to donors, and also to clearly establish next steps, including a timeline for appropriate follow-up. We recommend at CCS contact with a prospect by phone or email within 2 weeks of a solicitation, but honestly, the quicker you can follow up, typically the better. It's also really important to clearly document any insights that you've learned through this meeting, any notes from the meeting, into whatever donor database or CRM your organization uses, and to be able to share those notes with development and organization leadership. because again, every one of these meetings is a learning opportunity, and hopefully in meeting with our prospects and in developing a better understanding of what motivates them, we're going to be able to be that much more strategic in our next conversation and sort of subsequent requests on behalf of the organization. So to conclude, we wanted to just underscore that preparation, enthusiasm, and good listening skills are all key to successful solicitations. And there is a lot that's out of control as fundraisers, as Kim mentioned. Few solicitations go exactly as we've planned. So we really need to cultivate within ourselves and within our fundraising teams flexibility, adaptability, passion and warmth, and sort of the ability to just kind of roll with the punches, because sometimes things happen and they're unexpected. It's also important to remember that even a failed solicitation is not a failure if we learn something and apply it well in future donor strategies. So we really emphasize with our clients that every solicitation is a learning opportunity about our donors. And you know, that if we can learn even and extract even one insight from a particular meeting, it's you know, been a successful meeting for the organization. And of course, important to listen, important to stay relaxed and prepared, and to establish those follow-up next steps. Because I think oftentimes too, you can have a successful meeting and then there might be some lag time between the follow-up that can potentially slow things down. So with that, thank you for your participation today. We do have some time that we've kept to field any questions or comments, and I think the floor is open for questions through either the chat function, the Q&A function. So we're happy to take questions.
So Tammy, thanks for your question about the stock market. There's definitely some uncertainty looming, and I wish all of us had a crystal ball to better understand what is going to happen. Again, this comes back to really relationship-driven fundraising. So I think that the stronger case you can make for the organization and the better the relationships that you forge with your donors, the support will still be there. We might see some longer timelines in terms of if you're thinking about longer pledge periods, or maybe donors would make a smaller initial gift but be open to revisiting the conversation in a future point when they might feel a little bit more settled. Kim or Kimberly, would you have anything to add to that?
No, I think you've hit the points. I think the biggest thing that I've seen in clients that I've worked with is an extension of the pledge period. I think we're also seeing potentially more complex giving vehicles being used. So I've tended to work for larger organizations, so this might be characteristic of the larger organizations as opposed to smaller. But we're seeing more donors that are interested in giving in-kind gifts, real estate gifts, are looking at blended gifts with an estate component and, you know, a cash or pledge component, and certainly longer giving timelines.
Okay. How much does one know how to ask? Yeah, how does one know how much to ask for? So that's a good question. So I think it depends on kind of the population that you're asking money for. If it's kind of an annual, what we might consider a lower level gift, or whether you're looking at a major gift. With the major gifts, you need to do a little bit more homework. So you need to do some research on what somebody's capacity might be. What does their giving look like elsewhere? What other intel can you get from either volunteers who might know this prospective donor, board members who might know this prospective donor, who might know a little bit more about their financial capacity and how your organization fits into one's personal philanthropic priorities. But again, it could be also that first meeting isn't an ask meeting where you're starting to get to know somebody and learn more about them and what their interests are and where their real passions lie. But a lot comes down to the research. For some of the lower level donors, you typically base it on what if they're a previous donor, what their giving history has been at the organization, if there are certain benefits, if it's a more of a transactional relationship, if there are certain benefits that you know that they're interested in, that might be a good indicator of where they're thinking in terms of what ask they might be ready for. Okay, we'll try to go back to 4 of the responses.
So while we go back to that slide, we'll take the next question also. I found the hardest part to be the follow-up. How can we make this succeed?
Yep. So I think we use deadlines a lot in things. So whether they're artificial or not, we have a board meeting coming up, or we have a gala coming up and we'd like to list you. We have reunion coming up and we'd like you to be listed as one of the donors. Can I come back to you in 2 weeks' time to follow up on your answer? So trying to create that sense of urgency, or the dean is going to make some decisions about the financial aid award allocations by a certain date. We really would love to have that full picture of what the support for financial aid is going to be by that date. Can we count on you to make a gift by that deadline? Thank you, Stan. Versus volunteers. So when should the ask be done by professional fundraisers versus volunteers? So volunteers can be really compelling if I've made that level of commitment and I'd like Kimberly to do the same. And it depends on kind of what level you're talking about. If for a number of gifts that are, when we work with clients who are talking about 7-figure, 8-figure gifts, there's usually the leader in the room as well as a volunteer, because the leader can really make the case and arguments for the future of the organization and the transformative impact that a gift of that magnitude can have. But it's about that peer-to-peer ask that can be really compelling. I've made this type of a commitment. Kimberly, I know you have the capacity to do the same, and I think together, imagine what that impact could be on the organization and on the people who can benefit from it. And I just say, I think in terms of professional fundraisers, there's a lot of the asks that are done by professional fundraisers. You really kind of want to be strategic about how you use your volunteers. And so in the event that the volunteers can really be helpful to you in getting a donor to move to a higher giving level, then I think it would be beneficial at that point to involve them.
There was also a question, I think related, which was this presentation assumes that we already have the meeting on the calendar with the donor, and what are our recommendations for actually securing those meetings? And I've seen very successful track records with volunteers in assisting with getting that first meeting as well. So I think, to the extent that you can leverage volunteers, board members, friends of your organizations to help open doors to others in their network, or others, other peers that they might have in their respective industries, their geographies where they're living and working, can be helpful as well.
How do we get the board to feel motivated? So we do see this from time to time. I think a big part of why a board starts to feel lack of motivation is when they kind of lose sight about why they're a board member, and that we do less stewardship of them and more asking of them. So we're asking them to make a gift to this, we're asking them to make a gift to that, we're asking them to do X, Y, Z. And I think that I've found some great success in terms of taking a moment, whether it's at a board meeting or a board retreat, to remind the board about why they're involved, and as a whole, but also on an individual level, for them to be able to articulate what's meaningful to them about the organization. So how do they work with the leadership to really craft the future vision of the organization, right? They have come to the organization because they are interested in it to begin with. And it's really important to continue to stoke that interest in order to continue to get them forward thinking and not feel unmotivated. Sorry.
You know, there's been a couple questions about either cold calling donors or finding an initial pool of donors, in particular for a smaller organization or those with less of a fundraising history. And I think that also dovetails nicely to what Miriam was speaking to in terms of the board. Oftentimes we hope that board members or other individuals who are close to the organization will help make some of those introductions and at least give us a starting point. And often those relationships are much more fruitful than going out and cold prospecting. That said, we do also, you know, see some organizations who seek at least to use cold prospecting as a method for potentially gaining annual fund donors or maybe lower level donors who they think can be engaged with the organization based on interest level, and then maybe will transform into larger donors as time goes on. The other thing I wanted to just quickly address, so this presentation is, as a couple of you have picked up on, primarily focused on major gift prospects, though we do think that the principles laid out, maybe in different iterations, are applicable across the board, regardless of how large a gift is. And of course, the definition of major gift prospect will depend on the size of the organization.
Richard, I would just say absolutely you need to train your board in major gifts for a capital campaign. I mean, depending on the size of the campaign and what their involvement in those asks would be, but it's not fair to kind of assume that they will know these. I mean, we do these types of trainings for boards all the time, because while they might know whatever their field of interest is, this is a very different skill set that they need to continue to develop. And I think the development departments and the leadership at those organizations can play an important role in training those volunteers to have success in asking for different types of gifts. Which one do you want to film? Yeah, I think with seed funding with new organizations, there has to be, if you have some initial board members and asking them to make the investment, a significant investment upfront, to kind of help you map out a multi-year plan for where the organization wants to go, and how do you kind of leverage their networks. A lot of organizations start by doing events to kind of access and tap into the networks of their board members and current donors, and that's a great way to raise some friends. The next step, of course, is converting those friends into actual donors, and you do that by continuing to position the organization, by learning more about those donors' interests, and how do you kind of intersect with what interests those donors.
To that point as well, I think with especially smaller organizations who potentially don't have a history of fundraising, or development efforts, thinking about what you already do as an organization and really leveraging, to Miriam's point, some of those events you might already have planned, or some of the pieces of the work that are already part of what you generally do, and inviting individuals to join you and see those things, really to ensure that bandwidth is being used appropriately across the organization can be helpful. I'm going to address the slide issue one more time as well. So I've actually been alerted that we are more than happy to share this presentation with anyone who joins YANA as a member. Our donations, or our membership fees rather, are actually just $5 a month. So we think that they're fairly reasonable, and of course welcome other types of commitments, and would be willing to share slides regardless of what that might look like. I also have been told that there's a very nice website, or availability of the website. If you go to YANA, YANA.community, it'll take you straight to our website. I'm happy to remind at the end of this as well about that link.
Sorry, we're just going to go through and see what questions are still outstanding. And of course, you have access to our contact information. So if there are questions that we don't get to or didn't answer to your satisfaction, please feel free to follow up. How are naming gifts determined? Is there a standard percentage of total project cost? We have a lead gift of $100,000. So I think that the way we approach naming gifts, so if you have a $750,000 project, you want to kind of build out the gift table, the number of gifts that would be needed at different levels to meet that $750,000 goal. So that probably looks like a lead gift of $100,000, or if, I don't know if you're anticipating that you might get a gift that's higher, but you want to make sure that you have enough naming opportunities. Not everyone is going to want one, but you want to have enough to offer so that you can get to that goal. Sorry. Closing strategies mentioned the steps of donor office. Yeah, I mean, I think as Kim mentioned, just in terms of closing strategies when a donor offers less or asks for more time, I think it's fair to say I recognize that this is a significant ask, and I want you to take some time to think about it and use some of those follow-up strategies that we talked about in terms of creating a timeline.
I think sometimes too, just to add to that, it's helpful you want to be deliberate and intentional about this, but to think of other members in the organization that might also be, useful introductions for that particular donor. So if you are, with Yale SOM, for instance, and the scholarship program, are there professors, are there students, are there others that might be, also compelling for this particular donor and might be able to answer any questions that the donor has about this, particular request. So I found too that any activity that can deepen the relationship of the donor and the organization, while obviously being respectful of a donor's request for additional time to consider the gift, are usually pretty effective.
So I think we talked a little bit about 2018. So the Giving USA information for 2018 isn't going to be available until June in terms of kind of a formal assessment. Anecdotally, we're just kind of starting to see the results come in from 2018. Again, there is this uncertainty. There is maybe more of a longer time between people committing to gifts or asking for longer pledge payment periods. And we see this typically when donors are kind of less connected to an organization. I think there is kind of this wait and see. Nobody knows what's going to happen in the coming years. We're beyond annual fund. We're kind of building into our campaign timeframes some sort of market correction in the next coming years. So we're tending to build out a little bit longer campaigns in anticipation of that. Philanthropy tends to be a lagging indicator. So with the economy in 2008, we actually didn't see the decline in philanthropy until 2009. And so, you know, our advice to our clients is, as things continue to be strong, kind of make hay while there's that opportunity to do so. And we're happy to come back to this group as more emerges in the coming weeks. How do you handle if a potential donor refers to larger issues within the sponsoring organization that have changed? School at Yale, I used to support X, which I agree with, but now supports Y. Yeah, this is really tricky, and I think this is one of those instances where you have to listen to what the donor is telling you. It could be a temporal thing where this isn't a policy that's fully in place. If it is a policy that's fully in place, it's pretty likely that the donor might not continue to support until that policy changes. And so I think you do have to kind of follow the donor's lead on that. Or there's also a way to kind of pivot potentially if, are there other areas of interest for this donor that align with other policies or other programs that the university is doing, for example, where somebody could maybe dedicate their resources within a program to have the type of impact that they're looking for. Yep, so we're still working on closing 2018. Learning about donor capacity. So there are a number of different vendors that actually will do wealth screenings for cost. This is all above board. We work with many clients that use these types of services, including the ACLU. But what these services do is aggregate publicly available information, real estate holdings, stock holdings, other demonstrations of philanthropic giving. So there's a number of different sources, Wealth Engine, iWave, WealthX. You know, we kind of have really, we're not endorsing one over the other, I guess the legal caveat there, but there are these different services that exist. And I think that just a word of caution in terms of donor capacity from these wealth screenings, it's really meant as a directional tool. It's not a foolproof source. There's some limitations in terms of privately held companies, certainly, that would underreport somebody's wealth. Sometimes if people are heavy in real estate wealth, that means they're not so liquid in what they might be able to give support, liquid cash outlay to an organization. So I think you just need to dig into those results a bit more. Matching funds, we received a large, yeah, I think with matching funds, they can be a powerful motivator, and I think it really depends on what is your donor base and what is the pool that you're trying to galvanize. Matches can be really effective for smaller level donors, right? They have the opportunity to possibly double the impact of their support. Matches can also be helpful. We've had some success in terms of leveraging planned gifts and getting people to actually document their bequest intentions to an organization. It kind of really depends on how much midway through your capital campaign, how much money do you have left to raise, and
where is the untapped opportunity to date, right? So if that's at the six-figure level and there's a number of six-figure donors or people that you think a match would inspire them to get to the six-figure level, I think that's a great way to do it. Or if you're looking to really boost participation at the lower levels, that could be worthwhile as well.
So I'm being told that we need to wrap up because we're over time. I'll leave this slide up though if you have follow-up questions and would like to email one of us. Happy to take those on, and just want to thank everyone again for joining the webinar. We will be sending up a follow-up from YANA about joining YANA and all the other great opportunities that we have in store for this coming year, and hope to see you either in person or via webinar again at one of our other events. So thank you all so much for your time.